Good Zavach, everybody. We'll start from Yud Gimel Amar Aleph, about 4 or 5 lines down. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af Isha Acheres Maskin Aloi. So the Mishnah told us that the Tanakama holds that they prepared a backup Kohen Gadol, and Rabbi Yehuda said that they prepare a backup Isha for him. But the Rabbanan don't say that. So Frek the Gemara of Rabbanan Nami, Hachayish Hachayshi L'Shema. The Rabbanan also feel the need to make a contingency plan because they set up another Kohen Gadol. So clearly they're into contingencies. So why aren't they concerned about the contingency of having another wife? Amrulach Rabbanan, Tuma Shchicha, Misa Lo Shchicha. Tuma, something that could happen. It's something more common. So for that, we'll make a contingency plan and create another Kohen. But the fact that the Kohen Gadol's wife might die, that's not likely. For that, we don't make a contingency plan. And I have a stupid question. I must have thought of it already, and I don't know why I forgot to answer to it. Okay. Is that if they set up a secondary Kohen Gadol, isn't that also a contingency plan if the Kohen Gadol's wife dies? If his wife dies, they just set up another Kohen. Isn't that a good contingency plan? The only person who wouldn't like that contingency plan would be the first Kohen Gadol. But as far as the void is concerned, wouldn't that work?
I think you are.
No? Anybody? Okay. So
what's your question? That they already are considering this.
If you have the Gemara is asking, why do you need, the Gemara asks, if you need a second Kohen Gadol, because he might become Tomei, why don't you need a second wife just in case the Kohen Gadol loses his wife? Well, if the Kohen Gadol loses his wife, we have a second Kohen Gadol already.
Right.
So why isn't that? So I
you
guess
the Rabbanan are already concerned about one of the wives dying.
Right. Once you have a secondary Kohen Gadol, so you've dealt with that. You've dealt with any problem that might occur. So I don't know. Okay,
maybe there's a greater concern if you give him 2 wives, you're going to kill him.
I hear. Okay, so now the next Gemara is going to be very geschmack. It's going to tell us that the best way to improve something is to create competition. Amr Loy, the Rabbanan told Rabbi Yehuda, if you're going to be concerned that he might lose his wife and you're going to prepare a second wife, well, guess what? Once you're concerned, so maybe the second wife will die, and prepare a third wife and a fourth wife. Correct the Gemara, Shopper, Karmile, Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbanan have a very good time now. If you're going to be concerned and you're going to make contingencies, so then you'll never make enough. You'll never have enough contingency. Zok Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Lach, Lemisa dechada chayshina will be choshed that his wife might die, but Lemisa the Tarti to be so concerned that 2 wives will die, that's something of a plague, loy chayshina, that we're not choshed for. Rabbanan, the Rabbanan says you can't split it that way. Once you're going to make a contingency for a wife dying, then afilu lemisa the train chashina. Then you'd have to worry about the second wife dying as well, and therefore we're not even going to go down that rabbit hole. Rabbanan, Nemer Elu Nafshayu, the Rabbanan, they should talk to themselves. In other words, if you hold that if you're choshesh for one, you have to be choshesh for many, so then the Kohen Gadol himself, how could you just make one Kohen? You have to make multiple Kohen, right? The Rabbanan's time to the Yehuda was, if you're worried about the one lady dying, you have to worry about them all dying. No. So if you're worrying about one Kohen dying, worry about the other Kohen dying. Amr Lach Rabbanan, the Rabbanan says no. Kohen Gadol Zoris. The Kohen Gadol is a Zoris. And Rashi tells us, V'nishmar minatoma. He's going to be careful not to become Tomei. Aval Misa, but his wife passing away, Ein Misur B'Yadenu. That we don't have any control over. So that's why we can't do anything about it. But the Kohen Gadol is a Zoris. In fact, the Gemara is Zorisu. If the Kohen Gadol is a Zoris, then we don't need to be worried they'll become Tomei. So then Lama Maskinan Kohen Acher. So then Bechalal, why do we set up another Kohen? Zok the Gemara, very simple. To create competition, the Kivan Avdinu like Tzara, once he knows that if something happens to him and he becomes Tomei, someone else is going to take over. Kol Shegein to Mizdarif Tzvei. If he became Tomei and then nobody could do the Avodah, he can live with that. But someone's going to take over for me? Oh, no. That's way too much. That I got to be careful for. So the fact that the Kohen knows that if he becomes Tomei someone's going to take over for him, that's a major motivation to him to be super vigilant, not to become Tamei. Frek the Gemara. Let's go back to understand what this contingency plan is from Rabbi Yehuda to set up a second wife. Because the Pashut Pshat is not that he actually marries her, you just prepare her. So in the event of a death, the Kohen Gadol could marry her right then and there. Frek the Gemara, would it help if you just prepared for him? This is a woman who's prepared to marry him, but he's not currently married to him, to the Kohen Gadol. So how would that satisfy the requirement of Beisai? No, he'll be Mekadesher. For the Gemara, Kiddushin won't be enough. The Hakama de Lekonis law lav Beisai. The word Beisai, referring to a wife, doesn't just mean a woman who you're Mekadesh. It means a woman who she's part of your household, meaning you were Kodeser, you had Nesuin, you had Bia. So tomorrow, okay. So the Kodesh law, he marries this woman before Yom Kippur, and he lives with her before Yom Kippur. For tomorrow, Imkain Havel Shnei Batim. So now we have another problem. Now he's married to two wives. Now you have a problem that you have too many wives. So okay, the Hadim Megarishla. So you give her a get. We're right back to square one. The Shema Thomas, as Rashi says. So we're stuck over here. What is the help? What is the plan? Zogt Gemara. Loy tzricha. This is what you do. The Megarish law tonight. He married. He was. Let's say his first wife is Rachel. He marries Leah before Yom Kippur, and before Yom Kippur, he also gives a get. The moment he marries her, he presents her with a get. What a great way to start off a marriage. And he tells her, "I'm going to give you a get on the tonight. The Amar law hareza giteich almanasha temusi. You have a get." If you die, I'm divorcing you. I'm giving you a get that if you die, I'm divorcing you. So therefore, let's see what Rashi says. If you die in Yom Kippur, then I'm going to divorce you. If she ends up dying on Yom Kippur, nimtza get l'marfreya. Turns out that this Leah was already pre-divorced. And therefore, he only has one wife, his original wife, Rachel. And if she doesn't die, Rachel dies, he'll remain with Leah. She'ein haget get, because since she survived and the get was contingent on her dying, he's married to her. Now this doesn't make any sense, of course. So Zokt Rashi, until the middle of Amud Bayis, all of the upcoming proposals of the Gemara, ein tirutzin shebo yecholim lamoid. They're not serious tirutzin. They're not really havaminis that we can analyze. Ki yesh lem tshuvas rabbis. Suggestion by suggestion doesn't have a leg to stand on. Ve'enu ela ki melamdim ma'isanu. It's just teaching us she'im timer kain yesh lashav kain. So basically, what it's really doing is it's taking through 2 minutes of thought process of the Amoyroyim that we're trying to pinpoint exactly what the solution is. So many of the steps don't really make sense, and they get nixed right away. And the Gemara is going to nix each step for one reason, but there's many more reasons why each step wouldn't be valid anyway. On each step, when the Gemara dismisses it, you might be bothered. The Gemara says, in this kasha, I can ask you 5 more kashas. And the answer is that's true. But the Gemara just uses one for each thought to dismiss. Until on Amud Bayis, the Gemara finally comes up with a plan as to how this marriage and this divorce would be structured. So because of that, the suggestions that we're going to be hearing now are not really going to work. So let's try this one. If he divorces her on the tzad that she dies, well, what if she doesn't die? He's married to Rachel, he's married to Leah, and Rachel doesn't die, and Leah doesn't die. What's going to be? So now he's married to 2 women. That'll disqualify him. Ella, let's try another suggestion. The Amr Law, So he's married to Rachel, and he marries Leah. And right after he marries Leah, he gives her a get. And he tells her, this is going to be a get if you don't die. If you don't die, I'm divorcing you. If you die, I don't have to divorce you. So Zok to Gemara, Eloi Misa Migrishala. If she doesn't die, Eloi Mesa Migrishala. If she doesn't die, then he's divorcing her. The Imesa, but if she does die, Hakai Mahach, then her marriage is valid. And the other wife is still alive. So even if Leah dies, Rachel is still alive. In fact, that doesn't solve any problems. What if she doesn't die? If she doesn't die, if Leah doesn't die, then she will be Mugareshes. Because again, her husband, the Kohen Gadol, married her and gave her a get, almanas, that she doesn't die. So if she doesn't die, she's divorced. And what happens if Umaysa Chavrita and Rachel, the Kohen Gadol's first wife, also dies? So now he has no wife. Become Bayis. So weiter, he doesn't have a bias. Ella, let's try another suggestion. The Omar Law, again, he's married to Rachel. He takes a second wife. He takes Leah, and right upon the marriage, he presents her with a divorce. And he tells her, Almanash shetamus achas miken. If one of my two wives die, whether it be Rachel, whether it be Leah, I'm divorcing Leah. Fact to Gemara, Misa.
Yes, sorry to get back a little bit. What was wrong with the Kiddushin al Tanai? Did I miss it? Instead of all this divorce al Tanai, I'll be Mekadesh you on the condition that you remain alive through Yom Kippur.
Or whatever the Gemara ends up with, structured in such a way that it's on the Kedushin rather than on the Gerushin.
Correct.
Yeah, but you had the problem with Kanisa. You had to punish her. That was the thing.
And he had to live with her.
Exactly. So
right.
No one wants to retroactively make his bia into a bias nus. So that would make.
And also, what about on Yom Kippur? Also, there's a issue of that on Yom Kippur. No.
No. This would all happen before Yom Kippur.
Yeah,
right? Has to happen before. Be before Yom Kippur.
Has to happen 8 days before Yom Kippur.
That's right. You'd have to marry her a week before. That's right.
Right. You're telling me the guy's an upstanding guy, doesn't want to do his bila, should be a bila's nus, but yet he's engaging somebody and he's giving her a get. Why is that any different?
Listen, the life of a Kohen Gadol isn't all fun and games. and when you marry a Kohen Gadol, when they read your daughter a shidduch, oh, he's such a chashav bach, he's a Kohen Gadol, you should say, you know what, no thanks. It's only trouble. Every year, some other woman's going to come. What if he likes her more than you? You know, when he's doing the Chibur Ba'adu Vad Beisa, who is he really thinking about? Okay, so talk to Gemara.
Yosy?
Yes.
If we're going back, let's go back to the very first one. I don't get the very first one. That would seem to solve the problem. It's you marry her. I mean, you have her on standby.
So can we not use the word her? Let's use the word Rachel and Leah because I get confused. So his real wife is Rachel.
Wife. You're married to one wife. You have the second wife on standby.
She's married to Rachel, and Leah he's not married to, but he's prepared to marry her in the event.
And then the first wife dies, so he marries her. So the problem is, yeah.
So on Yom Kippur he's boil a woman.
Yes, no. There's other ways of doing it, but yeah, let's say. Yeah.
Well, on Yom Kippur you're not allowed to do that. And there's even
so maybe there's other
to make a kedushin on Shabbos. There's
I
even
mean, that's
to
not
make
the
a
Gemara's
kedushin.
answer. The Gemara's answer is Vachlaf Beisayu.
I'm sorry?
The Gemara's answer is having her on standby. Okay.
Is not Beisai. Right. He has to be married to her and she has to be konus.
Right, okay.
Zok to Gemara. If he said Almanasha Thomas Achas Beken, so Mesa, if she dies, Hakai Mahach. So if Leah dies, Rachel is still alive. Mesa Hach, if Rachel dies, Hakai Mahach, then Leah is alive. But for the Gemara, which doesn't make sense because Leah would be divorced, which Tosha speaks out. Leah would be divorced even if only Rachel died. So if Rachel died, there would be no Rachel and there would be no Leah. But the Gemara asks a different question. The Gemara asks, what if nobody dies? Now no one's divorced. So weiter, the Kohen Gadol has 2 wives. V'oid, and this kasha, pashtus, is a kasha on all the previous suggestions. If you give a woman a get, almanas, that she should die, that's never a good get. V'oid ki hai gavna mi havagita. Can you ever give a get in such a way? Rashi says, Shatnai toli bichayeha mi havaget. You're allowed to give a get on the tnai, but if the tnai is her life, which means when she dies, that will be the tnai that triggers her get, that will never work as a get. Because Rava taught us, if one presents his wife with a get, almanas that you don't drink wine for the rest of your life and for the rest of my life, ein ze krisus. That's not a good get, because she's not totally severed from him. She's still, for the rest of her life, she still has a connection to him because she can't drink wine. Rashi says, "Recall yemei chayeha kishura boy." She's tied to him, but not krisus b'inun. Get has to be a complete severance, a clean cut. However, if he says, "I'm giving you a get, almanas, that you shouldn't drink wine," kol yemei chaye ploini, as long as Moshe Pipik is alive, you should not drink any wine. Then I raise their krisus. That is considered a severance. And Rashi explains why. Kol yimei chaye ploni raise a krisus. V'sinose la'achar Mrs. Pliny. She could marry after Mrs. Pliny. So after Moshe Pipik dies, she can get remarried, which means she does eventually reach a complete severance. After Moshe Pipik will die, she can get married because she no longer is bound by the condition of not drinking wine. And not only is she considered severed after Pliny dies, even right now today, before the Tanai was Niskayim, if she has relations with somebody, she's not a Vade Eshes anymore. She's only a Suffolk Eshes. The Game Ayoim who get, the get will actually have an impact immediately. Shem Kilkala, if she had an illegal relationship with somebody, Ein Kan Chiyav Eshes. She wouldn't be considered an Eshes. She'eino Yala Kichashash. Shema Tishta Yain B'Chayim. It's only a problem if she ends up drinking wine in Moshe Pipik's life. But if she doesn't drink wine, then it turns out that she was Migureshes at the time of that relationship.
Yes, just to clarify, please. When is the get chal? Before she dies? It can't be after she dies.
The get is chal when he gives it to her Erev Yom Kippur.
That means after he married her, he gives her a get. So there's no tonight.
Never mind, no time. There's no honeymoon. There is a Tanai, because if the Tanai gets fulfilled, then she's Migureshes from the moment he handed her the get. But if the Tanai does not get fulfilled, then she remains his wife permanently. But whether the Tanai is fulfilled or not, the transaction occurs at the time that he handed to her the get, which was before Yom Kippur. So a later event is going to determine if the get that he gave earlier was a valid get or not.
This get is chal?
Sure.
How's the get? There's no creases though.
Sure, there's a creases, because once the get is chal, she's permanently severed from him. The only Tanai that the Gemara objects to is the Tanai of her dying. If my get is only a get, almanas that I die, so then in my lifetime, I'm never severed from him, because I have to die in order for the get to be a get. But if it's a different type of Tanai, like for instance, Tosfos brings an example of a case which the soldiers used to offer their wives, which had to do with the story of David HaMelech, where when a soldier left the battle, he would tell his wife, I'm giving you a get today before I leave, and if I don't return within a year, I'm divorcing you. So if a year passes by and he didn't return, she's divorced from before he ever left, right? And that's why David HaMelech was not a chayte, because Bathsheba got this type of get from her husband, her ex-husband, and since, even though she had relations with David before the 12 months, since after 12 months her husband didn't come back, it fulfilled the T'nai, and she had been divorced even before he left to go to the war. So let's see what the Gemara says. So let's try another suggestion. El the Amar law hareze gitech almanas shloitamas chavert. So once again, he's married to Rachel, who's his real wife. Leah is his second wife, and he marries Leah, the second wife, and then he immediately gives her a get and tells Leah, "You will be mugureshes almanas that Rachel doesn't die. If Rachel doesn't die, I'm divorcing you. If my Rachel dies, then I'm not divorcing you." So let's think about it. Eloi Mesa Chaverta, if Rachel doesn't die, Migresha, Leah is Migureshes, and the Kohen Gadol is married exclusively to his Rachel. V'Mesa, if Rachel does die, V'Mesaha, if Rachel does die, then the get Tanai was not fulfilled, which means Leah remains married to the Kohen Gadol. Hakaimaha. So that's a perfect arrangement. He's married to Rachel, and he gives Leah a get. And he tells Leah, if Rachel dies, then I don't want to divorce you. But if Rachel does not die, then you're going to be divorced. And that works out perfectly. So therefore, if Rachel survives Yom Kippur, then Leah is divorced. Leah wasn't married to him at the time. And if Rachel doesn't survive Yom Kippur, then Leah is married to him. Frankly, more, that all works if Rachel dies either before Yom Kippur or after Yom Kippur. But what if she dies on Yom Kippur? So imagine Rachel dies in middle of the avodah. So what happens? It triggers that Leah's get is not a get. So Rachel dies, and Leah is married to the Kohen Gadol. So the entire afternoon, even though Rachel's dead, the Kohen Gadol has a wife, Leah. So there's no problem. But what about his morning avodah? If Leah's get is not a get, that means in the morning, while he did the avodah in the morning, he was married both to Rachel, because his wife was still alive, as well as to Leah. So once again, Vigloi Milsala Mafreya, it's going to show us that retroactively, while the Kohen Gadol was doing the avodah in the morning, the Gita Daha, Lav Gitahu, Leah's get was not a get because Rachel ended up dying. But Rachel was still alive in the morning. So the Ovid Le'avodah B'shnei Batim. So now the morning avodah once again has been completed while the Kohen Gadol had two wives. So that suggestion doesn't work either. So let's try another suggestion. Elad Amar Law, once again, he's married to Rachel. He marries Leah before Yom Kippur, and he right away gives her a divorce, and he tells her, "Areza gitech almanah shetamish chavertech." I'm giving you this get, and it should only be a get if Rachel dies. So if Rachel dies, then you're divorced, which doesn't make any sense either, because v'dilma ma'isa chavertech. What if Rachel does die? V'havala gita the Gita, and that means Leah's get is valid. So now he has not Rachel and not Leah. Become Leah below Bayis. So that solution doesn't work either. Right? These are obviously not solutions that will work, but that's what Rashi said, that the Gemara is just like thinking aloud, not really presenting this option as a valid option.
Didn't the Gemara present this option already on what all three?
No, the option on Aleph was Almanah Shaloi Tamas Chavertech. Now it's Almanah Shatamas Chavertech. I mean, we could look back. We could do a fact check. Let's do a fact check. Let's go back and see. It says Almanah Shaloi Tamas Chavertech. And the earlier ones were talking about Leah herself dying. We didn't start talking about Rachel dying until down here. Up here we were still talking about Leah dying.
Right, it was on Leah.
I had to, when I prepared this Gemara, by the time I finished preparing, I had such a migraine because I was so confused about what's going on. So I just relied on Rashi telling me that I don't have to worry so much until I get to the end.
Got it, okay.
So what did the Gemara say here? So now the Gemara has.
Yosy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm obviously having a difficult
Akiva, we're
time with
delighted
this
to hear you
Gemara.
interrupt.
Thank you, but I'm a Kohen Gadol. You're allowed to be married to two women anyway. This is before Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom, right?
Right. He could be married to two women, but he can't do avoid Yom Kippur.
So why can't he be? He's married all year round. He's a Kohen Gadol. He's a big shooter, and he has 3 wives. He has 5 wives. What's the difference?
Because on Yom Kippur it says the Chiber Ba'aleu Bat Beisoi, on Yom Kippur his avodah is only kosher if he has only one wife. And it's funny that you bring that up. In this Gemara, it's an old Shas Pninim, so I don't have all the good stuff on the bottom. But for whoever has a newer Gemara, if you have, I think it's Lakutei Rashi or Tosfos Yeshonim, he brings down from the Novi of a Kohen Gadol who had 2 wives. So the Gemara, so he asks, if he had 2 wives, how did he do the avodah? So it says that he would divorce one of his wives before Yom Kippur, which means he couldn't marry her back. So I'm not sure. So it's probably a one-shot deal. He had two wives, and he divorced her before Yom Kippur. So sure, a Kohen Gadol could be a big shooter. He can marry as many wives as he wants, but every Yom Kippur, he has to pick the one he wants to stay with. So it's probably good if let's say he has 10 wives, and they all know that they're all going except for one. So he probably gets royal treatment because everybody wants to be the one to remain.
Sounds like it'll have the
Yossi.
reality show.
The word base soil, his house, really doesn't say you can't have two wives.
The Gemara, let's look at the Gemara. The Gemara says
It's not. What should it say differently? His house.
V'chiber
house
b'adei
could be whatever the size
b'ad
his house is.
v'loi b'ad shnei batim. Beisov, it should say Beisov. V'chiber b'adei b'ad Beisov.
Base saw her
Plural.
house.
No, Beisov means his homes, his
His
houses.
houses.
Yeah. That's what the Gemara seems to say. That a wife is like a house. She shouldn't be the size of a house, but she should. I remember I was once in court for a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. There was a traffic ticket, and I wasn't familiar with how the court works. And there was a judge there. It was a woman, and she was a besa. She was a kanai nahara. Her opinion carried a lot of weight. And what happened was everyone was referring to her as your worship. And when I got up to speak by mistake, I said, "Your battleship." Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. So talk to Gemara.
You know, as a grusha, she would have a higher status. She was once married to a Kohen Gadol, so she would be very in demand.
In demand.
But
Yeah. The one that didn't make it.
that's right, the one that got divorced.
I once heard from a famous comedian, second place, like if you win the silver medal, that just means you're the first place loser. Zog the Gemara, Ella, the megarish lahu litervai. So let's say that he divorces both of his wives. So let's now regroup. He's married to Rachel, and then he marries Leah. And he's going to give both Rachel and Leah a get, but the conditions on each of these two gittin are going to be different. So the Megarish L'Tavayu, he divorces both Rachel and Leah. L'chada Omar, to Leah, the second wife, he's going to say, Hareze Gitech, I'm presenting to you this get, Almanah Shaloi Thomas Chavert. If Rachel does not die, I'm going to be divorcing you. So that's perfect. So if Rachel dies, I'm not divorcing you. So just in case Rachel dies, I have my wife Leah. Ulechada, and then he goes to Rachel and gives her a get as well. Amallah, he tells her, Hareza Giteich, I'm divorcing you, Rachel, as well. Almanash loitikansi lebeis haknesses. If you don't go into the beis haknesses, I'm going to divorce you. So how does this help? It helps beautifully. What was the whole problem? The whole problem is, what if Rachel dies midday? If she dies midday, then Leah's get is not valid. Rachel was his wife in the morning. So now in the morning, both Rachel and Leah were married to this Kohen Gadol. But now that he put a condition and he divorced Rachel, and he said, if you don't go into the beis haknesses, you're Mugureshes, well, if she dies, she's not going into no beis haknesses. She's dead, which means it's going to trigger the get from Erev Yom Tov. So now we solved the problem. Even if Rachel dies in the middle of the day, which will invalidate Leah's get, which means now Leah is also the wife of the Kohen Gadol, Rachel will now trigger her own get, which will now make her Migureshes from before Yom Kippur. So it would turn out that Leah was really the Kohen Gadol's wife all along. So now we're starting to make some progress with a plan that might work. But Frank the Gemara, Vidilma, there's still a problem that could potentially occur. Vidilma loy ma'aseh chaverta. What if Rachel does not die? That means Leah's get was valid, which means Rachel is the wife of the Kohen Gadol that we're relying on, and she forgets, and she doesn't walk into the beis haknesses. So that will trigger her get. It'll trigger her get. Leah's get was triggered because Rachel's alive, And now v'kom lebele Bayis. And now, once again, the Kohen Gadol is left without a wife. And you have to understand that she can't go into the basic Knesset, even if she survives the whole day, she can't go into the basic Knesset any time during Yom Kippur, because the moment she walks into the basic Knesset and she invalidates her get, now, should she die, she'll cause the same problem again. So she needs to wait before she goes to the basic Knesset until after all the avodah is performed, maybe till Motzei Yom Kippur, and then she could go. So whenever the deadline for her to go till the Tnai expires, she has to go. But if she forgets to go, she retroactively messed up the entire avodah because she was Megureshes and then Leah was Megureshes. So we need a safer, more reliable plan. So let's start again. Ela Lachada to Leah, his second wife, Omer La Hareza Gitech Amanash Le Thomas Chavart. Leah, you're going to be divorced if Rachel does not die. If Rachel dies, you're my wife. And to his wife Rachel, he says, I'm giving you a get. I have the ability to trigger this get merely by walking into the Besmedrash. If I walk into the Besmedrash, I can trigger your get. Him, we trust. The Imaisa, if Rachel dies, Kaima ha. Leah is now his wife. V'maisa ha, and if Rachel dies, Kaima ha. Leah will. If Leah dies, Rachel will be the wife. My ikalamemer. What is the only potential problem, like we discussed earlier? Dilma maisa chavrita bepalga davoda. Maybe Rachel will die in the middle of the avodah, and which will now undo Leah's get. And therefore, and now in the morning he ended up having two wives. Zok Gemara. Now we've got that covered because he chazila the kaboyla meimas. If he sees that his wife is about to die, kodem iu v'ayil lebeis knesses, he'll run into the basic knesses umash v'lagita lahagita lemafreya. So this way, the Kohen Gadol will run quickly into the basic knesses if he sees that his wife is about to die, to make sure that she's Megureshes. And that's how it works. At the end of the day, the final plan is that the Kohen Gadol is married to Rachel. He marries Leah before Yom Kippur, and then he gives both of his wives a get. Leah's get has a Tnai. If Rachel survives, then this get is a good get, and if she doesn't survive, this get is bottled. And Rachel's get says that if I walk into the basic Knesset, you'll be Megureshes. If not, no. So therefore, if he sees that his wife is about to die, he could run into the basic Knesset and divorce her retroactively, which would then make it that he was always married to Leah. Okay, beautiful.
So what about the factor that he had to live with her already? Did he live with her?
He could live with her.
Leah,
he could marry her, live with
Leah?
her, and then after he lives with her, then he gives her the get. And he doesn't have to live with her after he gave her the get.
Uh-huh.
He's probably not even allowed to live with her once he give her a get al atnai.
Mm-hmm. But he had lived with her, so he was married to.
Lived with her. So it would be
So
a
he
real
was
wife.
married to both of them at the same time
Until he gave
until
Gittin, he was married to
the
both of them.
get. Right.
Yeah. So someone asked me, what happens if she's about to die? He goes into the basic Knesset and divorces her, and then she turns for the better. So then he's got to daven for her to die, because otherwise the avodah Yom Kippur gets messed up. So someone also said, imagine he's bringing karbonos on behalf of him and behalf of his wife, but when he's having in mind to bring a carbon on behalf of his wife, he doesn't even know which wife he's thinking of. So his wife says, are you thinking about me or are you thinking about her? You know what? I don't know what I'm thinking about. Zok the Gemara weiter. Maskav lo Rabasi. Rabasi had a problem with this whole thing. You're saying that Beisai means his wife. And one Bayis means only one wife. Well, if that's the case, we have a problem, because we know the halacha is, Lo Yaleinu, if Reuven dies without children, and he leaves over 2, 3, 4 wives, they're all faulty Yibum, and you were meyapim one of them. But the problem is, it says in the Parsha of Yibum, it actually says it at the end by the Chalitza, as Shaloyakim as Bayis Achiv, it says Bayis. And if you're going to say that Bayis means that there's only one wife, how is it that when there's multiple wives, you're still a Chiyav Yibum? Maskul Rabasi v'tem Rabavir. If Reuven dies and he has 2 wives, lo yisiyabmu, they shouldn't be able to make Yibum because it says Bayis, and we're saying Bayis means one Bayis and not 2 wives. And for the Gemara, you're right. That's what we would say, Kosher Pshat. But Yivimtoi Riba, the pasuk about Yibum mentions the word Yivimtoi twice, and one of them doesn't have to be there. And therefore, we learn that even multiple Yivamas are mechuyev in Yibum, even though it says Bayis. Does anybody have a newer Gemara that has the psukim quoted at the side? If you do, could you read it? Because I don't have it handy. Where it says Yivimtoi. Oh, Mechi's getting ready.
Im layachpoi tzaish lakachas as Yivimtoi, so also Yivimtoi ha'era.
Right, so it's mamish extra because it could have said
Im layachpoi lakachas as Yivimtoi.
It could have said Velokachla. He doesn't have to mention the word Yivimtoi again. So the extra Yivimtoi tells you that even though there's multiple wives, there's still a Chiv. Thank you. Maska for Ravina. Ravina has another question. Shravya. Once again, Beisai, we said, means not just that there's Kedushin, there's also Nisuin. He was Kaineser. There should not be a Chiv Yibum on a woman who's on a Rusa. And we know that there is. And for the Gemara, Hachutza, L'Rabbi says Harusa. So, Mechi, I'll ask you once again to read the next pasuk where it says Hachutza.
Doesn't say. There's no next pasuk here. Hold on. No, it doesn't say anything about the chutzah.
Oh, you don't have the pasuk written at the side?
No, it doesn't say this one.
Oh.
It doesn't say this one. No, sorry.
Okay. I can look it up in the Chumash. It's at the end of the It's at the end of the verb. It's right after. I think it's like the next pasuk after that. But let me quickly get a Chumash here. I have one here anyway. So I'll look it up. End of the verb. Mechi, maybe help me. You want to tell? Oh, here it is. It's right over here. It says over here. Where is it? No, I'm sorry. It's earlier. It says Kieshu achim yachta b'meis echad mehen uvein ein loy sia eishus hameis hachutza lizar. So from the extra hachutza, we learn that even an arusa falls liyibum. Okay. Zok the Gemara weiter. Tana Rabbanan. Kohen Gadol makriv. Now we know that an oinen is a day that someone loses one of the 7 krivim. So the halacha is a Kohen Gadol is allowed to avoid in the Beis Hamikdash even though he's an oinen. And Rashi tells us, very important. Makriv oinen, Rachmana Shaya. There's a specific limud in the Torah to tell us that a Kohen Gadol could do avodah even though he's an oinen. Tichsiv, and we just learned this today by Mincha. La'ovevu le'imay lo yitame u'min hamikdash lo yetze v'lo yichalel. He's not mitame to his parents, and he doesn't leave the Beis Hamikdash. For the shinul b'schidas kachim, we learn in Maseches Zvachim the meis avav imay. If his mother or father died, the einu tzarich lotus mikudoshos klal. He doesn't leave the kedusha. He continues to do the avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. He continues to do the hakrovos. Because the fact that he's an oinen does not make his avodah mechullah. It does not pass his avodah. We know yalfinan, and we make a deal that Dafka Kohen Gadol has this rule that la'avavul imoy lo yitame. HaKohen Hedjit, but a Kohen Hedjit shelo yotza that didn't leave the Beis Hamikdash and continue doing avodah, even though he was an oinen, chilel, he is mechalal the avodah. So back into the Gemara, although he could bring makar of karbonis, he's not allowed to eat the portion that kohanim normally eat. Zokt Rashi ve'eino oichel shalei hutra kan ela avoda. The psukim only indicate that he's allowed to do the avoda, but to eat kachim, the kachim asurim la'oinin. Kachim may not be eaten by an oinin. We know it kal v'chomer mimaisa akal. We know it from meiser sheni, which is much less severe and chomer than kachim, than a carbon. And by meiser, we say in the vidu meisers, shomer Torah, le'achalti v'ani mimenu. In vidu meisers, we say that when we were an oinin, we didn't eat meiser. So if you cannot eat meiser when you're an oinin, you surely cannot eat kachim. But Rabbi Yehuda Omer, very cryptic message, kol hayoim. Frankly, more my kol hayoim. What does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he's arguing on the chachamim and he's saying kol hayoim? Omar Rava, I will tell you pshat in Rabbi Yehuda. Like nizracha el havil mitach beisa. Kol hayoim means the Kohen Gadol just lost his parent. He's very sad. He's very depressed. We go to his house and we schlep him out of his house and we force him to do avodah the whole day to get his mind off his tsar, to cheer him up. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda means. Kol hayoim, a Kohen Gadol not only may be makar v'izanayin, we proactively schlep him and encourage him to do the avodah. Amar le Abaye, Abaye said, this cannot possibly be pshat in Rabbi Yehuda. Hashto le Rabbi Yehuda, afukim afkinale. Rabbi Yehuda has a very stringent policy when it comes to an oinen. Because when it comes to a kohen hedit, and I'm learning like Rashi learned, and then I'll tell you what shver with Rashi, and I'll tell you what Tosfos learns. But Rashi learns that you see Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to hilchos oinen is very strict, because if it's a kohen hedit, afukim afkinula, you make him leave immediately. The Tanya we learned, if a kohen hedit was doing the avodah, v'shama shemeis lemeis, and he heard that he just lost a loved one, and he's now an oinen, maniach avedasei v'yoytze, divrei Rabbi Yehuda, he must stop immediately and leave. Rabbi Yosy Omer, yigmar, he can finish the malacha. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda has a very stringent approach to someone who's an oinen. V'yat amrit masinle mitach beisai, and you want to say that Rabbi Yehuda here is more lenient than the Rabbanan, and say that you actually bring him to the Beis Hamikdash? That's how Rashi learns pshat. Tosfos says you can't say pshat like that. You cannot say that this Bryce is talking about a kohen hedget, because Rabbi Yosy said yigmar. How could Rabbi Yosy say yigmar by a kohen hedget? We just saw earlier in Rashi that a kohen hedget who's an oinen who does the malacha passes the malacha. So this Bryce must be speaking about a kohen gadol. And let's read it again. The Tanya hayoyim makav al gabei mizbeach. If a kohen gadol was doing avodah, the shamash shemesh lemeis, and he heard that someone died, he must leave right away. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now this wouldn't be deraisa because we already showed from Sukkim that a kohen gadol and onion can do avodah, but it must be a derabanan. So how could you say according to Rabbi Yehuda that you bring the kohen gadol as a special to do avodah when Rabbi Yehuda himself holds that the kohen gadol, even though we deraisa, he could do avodah, we derabanan, we don't let him do avodah. Ela Amar Rava, we have to scratch the pshat that Rava learned in Rabbi Yehuda that kol hayoim means that you encourage the kohen gadol to do avodah. Rather, my kol hayoim, what does Rabbi Yehuda mean when he said kol hayoim? What he means is loymar she'enoi over kol hayoim, she'enoi ovid kol hayoim, that he may not do avodah all day, but he may do avodah at night. Why may he not do avodah all day? Gzeira shemayachal. We're afraid if he's doing avodah all day, he might also eat some karbanos. And although an oinen is allowed to do avodah, we learned on Amud Aleph, on Amud Beis, in the Rashi, that an oinen may not eat from the karbanos. So therefore, since we're afraid he might eat from the karbanos, therefore we don't let him do avodah all day. But at night, we do let him do avodah. What type of avodah needs to be done at night? Putting the residual emurim and chalavim on the mizbeach. That will let the kohen do. Why aren't we worried that he might eat some meat then? Zokt Rashi, because at night it's only also for an oinen to eat kachim midirabanan, not midiraisa. So since it's only also midirabanan, we're not going to make a gzeira on that dirabanan and not even let him do avodah, because even if he ends up eating kachim, it's only an issur dirabanan. Therefore, we will let him do the avodah by night. but during the day it's an Isur D'Oraisa from the Kachim. Therefore, we
I'm
don't
assuming we're
need to
not
let him
talking
do
about Yom
avodah.
Kippur. I'm assuming we're not
Sorry?
talking about Yom Kippur. I'm assuming we're not talking about Yom Kippur here, right? We're
I'm
talking
very
about
happy you brought that up because right now we're not talking about Yom Kippur, but very
Uh-huh.
soon we are going to be talking about Yom Kippur. So beautiful, beautiful. So Amar Rada Barava Larava, Umi Gazer Rabbi Yehuda Shema Yochel, is Rabbi Yehuda concerned that we shouldn't let a Kohen do avodah? We shouldn't let a Kohen Gadol do avodah because he might end up eating. But now we're talking about Yom Kippur. But now Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Af Isha Cheresh Maskinin Loi, Shema Tamas Ishtai. Rabbi Yehuda said that even if his wife dies and he'll be an Einin, we make a contingency plan to allow him to continue to do the avodah. Correct? The Gemara V'Imaisa Ishtoi Avid Avodah V'Legazer Rabbi Yehuda Shema Yochel. If Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that an onion may not do avodah because he might eat, so how can he let this Kohen Gadol, who is an onion, do avodah in Yom Kippur? He might eat. And for the Gemara, exactly what Mechi said. Amalei Hagiyasha, what are you talking about? Hazam Kivin Diyem Hakipurimu Dechula Amalei Ka'achli Hunami Lasalamecho. On Yom Kippur, we're not worried he'll eat. Nobody eats on Yom Kippur, so he won't eat either. So we don't need to worry. So we could let him do avodah even though he's an onion. But Hacha on a regular Monday, Dechula Amalei, where everybody's eating around him, Hunami Asalamecha. He might eat, therefore we need to prevent him from doing the avodah. So that was one teretz why you can't ask me a kasha from our Mishnah. But Dr. Gemara, even more. This Kohen, if you think about it, is not even an onion to begin with. Because didn't we say that he divorces his wife retroactively? So Dr. Gemara, he's not even an onion. V'amigrisha, didn't we say that he divorces her? Right? We say that if she dies, he'll walk into the besmedrash, and that means she'll be divorced retroactively. Dr. Gemara, you're right. He might not technically be an oinen. However, as Trudi Mila Mitrid, he's definitely not in such a chipper mood. And Rashi tells us a massive chiddush, I mean the Gemara's chiddush, Uvekachim, in order to eat, to do avodah, you don't need to be happy. But in order to eat kachim, ba'inin simcha gedula, you have to eat kachim with great happiness and in a very aristocratic fashion. Tichsiv, it says regarding the matnas kahuna, that the Kohanim eat the kachim, l'chon nesatem l'moshcha. And l'moshcha means kederech shamalachim oichlin. You have to eat like a king eats, and with happiness, with aristocracy, and therefore, even though he's not technically an oinen, he still wouldn't be allowed to eat kachim because he's very distraught. And I guess with that, we can conclude. So I want to wish everybody a good tavach, and the Mitchum tomorrow we will continue on Daf Yudalit.
Good.
That's your dollar, right?